Hey everybody, this is Wintermute, and I'm doing kind of an addendum to the existing Tech Talk videos because I've gotten some feedback from some people, from some of the game developers, and there's been some kind of, I guess, additions, you can say, that just kind of came out today, that I kind of want to kind of update what I've already said in some of the other videos. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with kind of the one that came out today, which was they updated a lot of the national reference sheets. And if you look at them, now there's a section at the very bottom of the setup for where some of the nations start off with a certain level of some of the technologies. So for the 1936 scenario, which is all I'm going to really talk about, the big one is that the Commonwealth starts with Radar 1 and Attack Transports 2. So that frees up some of their dice. Now, if you remember in my video, I said Radar was absolutely worth it for them. Attack Transports, I downplayed a little bit, but at this point, if they're already starting halfway there, hell, finish them off and get them, and really be even all that much bigger of a threat to Germany, or its holdings, wherever they may be, to really threaten them and really have to make them think about what they need to put there for defense. All the other nations, though, don't start off in the 1936 scenario with any tech levels, just Britain. If you look at the 39 scenario, it's it's a lot different. But again, I'm not as worried about that so much as the 1936 scenario, because that's the one I prefer to play. If I got a group of people together to play the 39 scenario and the majority wanted to do that, I would go along with it. But I prefer personally the 1936 scenario if that can be played. So also on the national reference sheets for Germany, they put in the Tiger IE on their sheet as something that they can develop when with heavy armor. Now, an interesting thing with this is there's no limit to how many you can make a turn. So basically, that's it. When you make heavy armor, it's a Tiger IE automatically. There's no reason to ever downplay it because the stats are the same across the board, except for the fact that it is target selection 1 through 3 versus vehicle class units. So that's a huge improvement. And that's even more reason for Germany to go ahead and want to go for heavy armor when they can. So those are things that kind of came out today. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go back and touch on some points that have come up since I did my previous line of videos. So one thing that was mentioned to me is one point I didn't make, and I was wrong on, was that you can build as many factories in a zone as you want. I had mentioned Germany had a factory limit of basically once they upgraded in Bavaria. It's one of those things where, it's pretty clear in the rules that you can do that, but I guess it just didn't cross my mind that you could, or should, Now, that said, that's still a pretty big investment in terms of, planning for the long term, because those major factories are not cheap. But maybe you think it's completely worth it to go ahead and build one in Eastern Germany or wherever to maximize the number of units going into Russia, per turn. So, but you can do that to get, even if you think you need even more tech dice than what Germany already kind of starts, because they start off in a pretty good spot for that. That is an option. So, yeah, I wanted to clarify that. Also, excuse me, it was brought up to me that I didn't mention during the video itself when I was doing Russia about their technological superiority victory condition. And quite frankly, I'd forgotten about it completely until I went and did the American video, and I think I mentioned it there. So what Russia needs is they need to end the game with heavy strategic bombers, long-range aircraft, strategic rockets, and heavy armor. Now, if you think back to the video, I had kind of poo-pooed on the idea of heavy strategic bombers and strategic rockets for them, and thought heavy armor was a good choice, and long-range aircraft was a lukewarm choice, but a viable one at the very least. Now, when this point was brought up to me, it was brought up to me from Morton, and he mentioned that these are some of these were kind of chosen for Russia as a way to put them in a position where they have to make the decision of, am I going to go for things that are more effective in combat, or am I going to go for that victory point? Because heavy strategic bombers are not as clear cut, and they're not as clear cut. If you want to win combats, that wouldn't be necessarily one you want to go for. I think personally, their real strength is their ability to really do heavy damage to facilities and strip away their enemy IPPs that way. And same thing with strategic rockets, and I've already made that point with them. Heavy armor is obviously one that they probably want to go for, and long-range aircraft is not a top tier, but one worth going for. But he'd mentioned that it was kind of some of these choices were not necessarily lined up with their clear-cut play style, and he mentioned that was kind of deliberate. So and I should follow up with him and get kind of a clarification on why he feels, or why that decision was made when they were setting these up. So there's that. Now, I want to touch on strategic rockets. Now, Morton had also mentioned that strategic rockets, the unit is only going to be worth 4 IPP as opposed to 6, which is what it initially said in the core rulebook. So that's going to change to 4. That just makes them a little more feasible. Now, I know some people maybe they thought I was gushing a little bit over being strategic rockets and going, oh, I think they're really good. I think they're really interesting. Some of the stuff you can pull off with them. I don't necessarily think they're a grand choice, partly because, for one thing, it's a 9 or better. So you could be rolling a lot of dice before you get them. So that makes it kind of a steep climb for that. And it costs 6, you got to get the tech, which is going to probably take longer than a lot of the others, and then you have to pay to build it. Now, if it only costs 4, it becomes a lot more feasible to do that. But another thing that I kind of realized with strategic rockets, another way that they could be used is, let's say you're kind of down, and we're just going to use what's right in front of me right here. We'll say that Britain has 2 of them in Eastern Egypt for whatever reason. So right up here. Italy has moved their forces, most of their land forces, up to Western Egypt, and they're already at war with each other. And they stage their aircraft all the way back here in Tobruk. But what they don't do is they don't put any other units in Tobruk with that aircraft, or even here or wherever. So if you've got 2 of them here in Eastern Egypt, you can actually snipe at specific units if they leave them undefended in the backfield, and that might yield a bigger payoff. Now, if you're going to carpet bomb. Now, if you're going to carpet bomb, again, the chances of it are pretty low in being successful. It's only a 1 to 2 on a 12-sided dice. But if an opponent leaves high-value stuff undefended back here, even an undefended heavy tank somewhere, like on the Russian front, or a Panzer IE, where they just move it into a territory to move it closer to the front. The Russians see an opportunity, so they go ahead and start shooting at it. They may get lucky and take out a really solid piece of equipment, and have a really good exchange rate. I still think that hitting strategic targets is the safer bet if you just want to inflict damage. But if you think about it like that, sniping into their backfield with those rockets is a perfectly legitimate way of looking at them and looking at the board and going ahead and taking some low risk roll, or low chance rolls, but with the chance of a real good payoff. So that's just something I wanted to kind of add to my initial description of strategic rockets, as another way of looking at them when and if you ever field them, or if you ever decide you want to try to field them and plan for them, is the way that they can carpet bomb up to 3 spaces for anything that isn't doesn't have some soak off with it. So then let's see, what was the other thing? I don't know whether I made a point when I talked about wartime economy about you have to actually be at war with a major power to get that. So that's one thing to take into consideration. I know I mentioned that with America because they come into the war generally a lot later than the other guys, so it's a lot less valuable to them. But that consideration may knock it down a tier or two for whatever country you're looking at getting it for. Now, obviously, some countries like Germany are going to be at war pretty early. Britain is going to be at war pretty early, in all likelihood. Japan is going to be probably at war with a major power not long after Germany is, depending on how aggressive they are. And I think Russia. I think all the other major powers will be at war soon enough in the game to make it worth it. Except for maybe America. And then Italy's, again, a little more of a wild card because it depends on how you're going to play Italy. You don't have to go to war with Italy unless you want to. So if you really plan on being kind of a passive-aggressive kind of Italy, then maybe in that particular case, the wartime economy isn't really worth it. And maybe you are, want to go more with quality units rather than quantity. So you want to go start rolling for some of the other advanced units. So just one thing I wanted to bring up with wartime economy. I don't think I touched on that enough when I talked about the others. So I wanted to kind of go back and kind of insert this as something to consider. And then the other thing is, okay, a question I had asked Morton was, is it possible to, let's say you've got advanced artillery, just regular advanced artillery, not self-propelled artillery. Is it allowed to move in the combat phase if it intends to fire its attrition into an enemy territory? And he said no, because it only has a movement of 1. He did say, however, that self-propelled artillery, advanced artillery, can move 1, and because it has a movement point remaining, can go ahead and fire into an opponent's territory. So you can move self-propelled artillery up to 1 space during the combat movement, and so long as it has a movement point left, it can fire into an adjacent enemy territory. So that's not really spelled out in the rules that that's how it works, but I wanted a clarification on that. And then I also asked about strategic rockets, and he said, well, there's no way that they can move in combat and fire because they only move 1 space. They only have a movement of 1. So they basically just can't do it. So that self-propelled artillery is the only unit that can really move and still fire its attrition as far as advanced artillery goes. But yeah, I'm going to ask him to make sure that kind of gets clarified in the rules for that, because that was just an idea I just happened to come up with and I wanted to ask, and so I formulated the question, and I really wasn't expecting the answer that I was given. I thought it was going to be a flat out yes or no. But there you have it. That's another thing to consider when you're planning for, advanced artillery and what you want to build with it, is that advanced artillery, self-propelled artillery, is can move and shoot in some ways. So yeah. So right now that covers everything that I wanted to kind of add to what was already existing. This series will go on. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point I have to do a complete overhaul once more and more people start playing 3rd edition or version 3. Once I get more games under my belt, I may start to feel differently about a lot of the tech. There could be other, like some of what I just went over. There could be rules clarifications. There may be erratas come out because somebody found a way to kind of overdo or exploit a misplaced comma in one rule description, and suddenly they go, no, we can't let that go on. That's going to be too imbalancing. So we may have to revisit some of that stuff, and we're not even we haven't even touched on any of the expansions and how they might affect your choices in tech, or tech that is available to you might change the choices you have in playing with that expansion and the options that it gives you. So I'm sure we're going to go ahead. I'm sure there's going to be there's definitely more topics to visit or revisit as far as tech goes. And so I'll probably do more addendum videos like this and or explore the expansions and other things as they come up. But for right now, leave your comments below based on everything I brought up in this video. If you need me to hopefully clarify anything as far as I understand it, I'll be more than happy to do that. And we'll go from there. This is Winter Mute, signing off from the think tank.